Taliban special forces in camouflage have fired their weapons into the air, bringing an abrupt and frightening end to the latest protest march in the capital by Afghan women demanding equal rights from the new rulers. Meanwhile, the chief of Pakistan's powerful intelligence agency, which has an influence on the Taliban, made a surprise visit to Kabul. Taliban fighters quickly captured most of Afghanistan last month and celebrated the departure of the last US forces after 20 years of war. The insurgent group must now govern a war-ravaged country that is heavily reliant on international aid. The Women's March, the second in as many days in Kabul, began peacefully. Demonstrators laid a wreath outside Afghanistan's defense ministry to honor Afghan soldiers who died fighting the Taliban before marching on to the presidential palace. "We are here to gain human rights in Afghanistan," said 20-year-old protester Maryam Naiby. "I love my country. I will always be here." As the protesters' shouts grew louder, several Taliban officials waded into the crowd to ask what they wanted to say. Flanked by fellow demonstrators, Sudaba Kabiri, a 24-year-old university student, told her Taliban interlocutor that Islam's prophet gave women rights and they wanted theirs. The Taliban official promised women would be given their rights, but the women, all in their early 20s, were skeptical. As the demonstrators reached the presidential palace, a dozen Taliban special forces ran into the crowd, firing in the air and sending demonstrators fleeing. Ms. Kabiri, who spoke to the Associated Press, said the Taliban also fired tear gas. The Taliban have promised an inclusive government and a more moderate form of Islamic rule than when they last ruled the country from 1996 to 2001. But many Afghans, especially women, are deeply skeptical and fear a rollback of rights gained over the last 2 decades. For much of the past 2 weeks, Taliban officials have been holding meetings among themselves amid reports of differences among them emerging. Early on Saturday, neighbouring Pakistan's powerful intelligence chief General Faiez Hameed made a surprise visit to Kabul. It wasn't immediately clear what he had to say to the Taliban leadership, but the Pakistani intelligence service has a strong influence on the Taliban. The Taliban leadership had its headquarters in Pakistan and were often said to be in direct contact with the powerful Inter-Services Intelligence Agency. Although Pakistan routinely denied providing the Taliban military aid, the accusation was often made by the Afghan government and Washington. Mr. Faiez's visit comes as the world waits to see what kind of government the Taliban will eventually announce, seeking one that is inclusive and ensures protection of women's rights and the country's minorities. The Taliban have promised a broad-based government and have held talks with former President Hamid Karzai and the former government's negotiation chief Abdullah Abdullah. But the makeup of the new government is uncertain and it was unclear whether hardline ideologues among the Taliban will win the day and whether the rollbacks feared by the demonstrating women will occur. Taliban members whitewashed murals on Saturday that promoted healthcare, warned of the dangers of HIV, and even paid homage to some of Afghanistan's iconic foreign contributors, like anthropologist Nancy Dupree, who single-handedly chronicled Afghanistan's rich cultural legacy. It was a worrying sign of attempts to erase reminders of the past 20 years.